All right.
Hey, well, thank you all for coming. My name is Susan St. John, and I'm an English professor here at Windward Community College. And I'm so pleased that we're able to continue the out loud in the library, through the pandemic. And so I'm really delighted to have Bamboo Ridge here and one of the editors, Brenda Kwon, who's going to be introducing the readers. So Brenda, would you like to come on?
I would like to. I would first like to share a fun fact about Susan, which is that her favorite childhood book, when asked, was a book by Dr. Seuss, and she could not recall the title, but it had something to do with one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, which is exactly the title of the book. So well done. Anyway, so as Susan said, I'm Brenda. I'm one of the 4 editors for Kipuka, and I'm so pleased to be here today. We began this project and then COVID hit and everything went haywire. So honestly, during the editing process, we were just trying to do our best and try to hold some concentration on the volume as a whole while everything was chaotic. And felt like a little bit of a small miracle that it came together. And once we started having our readings, we were really wowed. We thought, wow, we picked some really good stuff. So every single reading has been just delightful. And I'm so happy to have this group here today. And before we get into the readers, I wanted to share the introduction. It's pretty short from the editors to tell you a little bit about the volume and how it came about. So this is our note from the editors. Land changes, gentrification, economic fluctuation, and an urban sprawl transform Hawaii's once familiar territory into the unrecognizable. Most recently, Kaka'ako's revitalization disoriented residents as old landmarks were razed to give way to shops and high-rises. Ever-changing times make for ever-changing places. Wanderers in our own backyard, we learn and form new relationships to replacement geographies that can sometimes leave us longing for what's been lost. This terrestrial palimpsest reaches further back than the agricultural industries and tourist booms, further than the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. In Hawaii, the Aina itself teaches us in its rawest, most powerful form that landscapes are created and recreated time and time again. Lava flows remind us that land is a living, dynamic force, not something inanimate that exists purely for our own use. Kilauea's 2018 eruption demonstrated the natural law of erasure and renewal, as well as the Aina's power of birth with the formation of Loihi, the newest island in the chain. If nothing is static and everything changes, in what can we anchor? Are we always at the mercy of our environment? Does the idea of home inherently imply that the words "for now" must follow? Little did we know that these questions would be more relevant than we could have ever imagined. We began this project at the end of 2019 when the word coronavirus carried a vague threat of calamity we couldn't quite fathom. In 2020, that calamity swept the earth as the number of deaths steadily ticked higher in figures that shocked some and inspired denial in others. Designated workers jeopardized their lives in empty landscapes in the name of what was essential, while much of society learned the terrain of their households with unwelcome familiarity. Those with nowhere to go remained on quiet streets, waiting for COVID. Our new surroundings gave rise to everything from an increase in domestic violence and mental illness to recipes for sourdough bread. Wildlife crept out of hiding, turning cities into jungles and oceans into playgrounds. The world was no longer as we knew it. With nowhere to run, we watched Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin murder George Floyd with a knee to his neck. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds shook the world with outrage and hashtag Black Lives Matter, as then President Donald Trump ordered protesters to be tear gassed, pepper sprayed, and shot with rubber bullets so that he could take a photo at Lafayette Square. As time marched forward toward a contentious election and historic firsts, weapon-wielding insurgents stormed the Capitol and casualties resulted in the name of voter fraud. Our elected were sworn into office, and as much as we loved that our vice president was a woman of Black and South Asian descent, celebratory remarks turned into voices of protest as hate crimes against Asians rose by triple digits. The mythic bearers of the China virus and Kung flu, Asians learned to expect anything from this crime of existing: beatings, stabbings, even a mass shooting. In the midst of such unprecedented upheaval, where do we find stability? More than mere steadfastness, constancy is the life preserver toward which we swim. It holds our survival. When volcanoes erupt, variances in topography create Kipuka, islands of turf untouched by the flow of lava. While Pele's fiery rivers caress its borders, its plants and seeds remain. It watches lava cool, then blacken. It witnesses Pahoehoe break down into rich volcanic soil. And when the time comes, it seeds its surroundings, sets free former boundaries as genesis and legacy join. Nā Kipuka preserve and regenerate. They survive and persist. They anchor and hold life, ensuring in the end that nothing is forgotten. So it is in this spirit of what holds us in times of change that we present to you the work of writers and artists who explore and engage where Kipuka lies for them. So with honor, I'd like to introduce our first reader, who is Vanessa Lee-Miller. And let me tell you a little bit about Vanessa. She is a poet, playwright, and freelance journalist. She was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii, where she still keeps one luau foot firmly planted on her ohana's kuleana. The other luau foot often travels to perform at literary events where the public's curiosity to hear Hawaiian in verse or drama has taken her to venues covering working class pubs, to the British Library and Pembroke College. Oxford, often identified as a Hawaiian language activist, she describes her decades-long struggle to keep Olelo Hawaii alive as essential to preserving our culture. The Olelo is the place where its soul thrives. And when I asked Vanessa what her favorite childhood book was, her answer was Peter Pan. So I'd like to welcome Vanessa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Bamboo Ridge Ohana. Aloha avakea kako. I'd like to begin by just briefly defining Kipuka as it's written in Pukui Albert Hawaiian Dictionary, the source and seeds of inspiration for many of us who are trying to keep Olelo Hawaii, Olelo Oiwi alive, thriving, and going wild. Kipuka, place in a high sea, and it's very much an anchor, a safe space, a wahi pana, a wahi kapu, and this Kipuka, it can be found in the middle of a dark forest, in the middle of a vast lava field, and it's brought together so much creativity in writing. And mahalo to Bamboo Ridge for keeping us going, hearing our voices, and supporting Olelo Hawaii. There's a wonderful quote from the intro that you read, Brenda, that I had already thought about, because now I'm nervous, but I had written it down, lucky thing. And it's coming from one of the last paragraphs in the intro. If nothing is static and everything changes, in what can we anchor? And I thought, wow, that's talks to, it's an open dialogue with a lot of the works that I've read in Kipuka. And I can't answer that question, but I can make an attempt with another question said, quoted by a wise man in Ephesus, Turkey, named Heraclitus in the late 5th century BCE. No man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. And I'm about to read my humble contribution to the vast and ancient corpus of river lore. And it's about the river that I've lived next to, the river that's helped raise me, And I'm reading it from my ancestral home in Pi'ihonua, Hilo, Hawaii, facing Wailuku. And here we go. Wailuku. Wailuku, the raging Kahawai, the river. Her kaholo, her long, sinuous journey begins as a watery, pencil-thin line, a mere trickle, Mocha, way up high, looking towards Nā Lani on Mauna Kea. Her awana is a graceful journey, iho, downslope, towards rainy Hilo. Hilo, Hilo ikawa kanilehua. As she continues to iho, journey downslope, a magical transformation ensues from her embodiment of a graceful, delicate trickle. She widens, becoming voluptuous. She's now a raging beast, plunging turbulently downward, full of enna, capable of arbitrarily grasping in her watery fist a young, reckless life and smuggling it into one of her many deep, cavernous pockets in her slimy Anna. She'll stash it there, it's hers, until the pale, lifeless form struggles through a multitude of tempestuous undercurrents to surface somewhere iho, downslope. But during the course of her journey, she leaves a trail of dazzling performances after week upon week of infinite drops of rain from Nā Lani. Awestruck Malihini call these wonders Pi'ihonua Camp Cascades, boiling pots, rainbow falls. Old Hawaii calls them Puakana, Koakanini. Pe'e waia nui nui. She weaves ever so gracefully, skirting around sacred smooth boulders, leaving her mossy footprints of slimy, slippery limu. She continues to awana in the wee hours of the morning. From my hamakua facing bedroom window, I hear her raging, bellowing sounds, drowning out the lonely, searching calls of the small, scaly river creatures of the night. Searching in blind rage, she leaves no boulder, no jagged rock, no slimy pebble unturned. River Mo'o waits, watching her every move, hearing her belches and snorts and eerie releases. He, shaking out the raindrops from his mane of writhing eels, belts out a wicked laugh. Get plenty time, he says slowly, sharpening his battle-ready claws against the skull boulder. He waits patiently for the right moon. O Wailuku, you watery, undulating, wahine ali'i, once a graceful trickle from Nā Lani, you've morphed into a skull crusher, you stone carver, you mo'o slayer, so bloodthirsty for the fearless, sweet, weed-scented swimmer. Or was it the claw of the mo'o of the rain-drenched cave of goddess Hina that dragged the young baga into the murky depths? Upon reaching her deep, dark, limu-laden green mouth, maka'ula nakila, she forcefully surrenders her full, swollen self, plunging once more into the wide, stormy bay. Both river and sea currents reluctantly mingle. She truly is what old Hawaii called her destructive waters, Wailuku, the river, life-giving, life-grasping, ruthless Kahawai. Wapau. Thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you, Vanessa. I remember when we were, reading the selections and your poem came in, and we were just like, oh, chills. Yes, let's put this one in. So thank you for just that incredible, vivid imagery and so tangible. Thank you.
No ukahau oli mahalo. It's an honor.
Thank you. Our next reader, I'm pleased to introduce the legendary Wing-Tek Lum. And if you've had a chance to talk to Wing-Tek, it's he has all these beautiful poems that are so like eloquent and everything. And then you have conversation with him and you're like, hey, Wing-Tek, how's it going? And he's like, good. And then, so he's a man of few spoken words. But if you see him on the page, it's just all this beautiful words and folded thoughts. And so on that line, when I asked him what his favorite childhood book was, he said, I was good at math and science. And so I said, okay, well then how did you start writing poetry? And he said, later in college. Okay, so basically what I managed to eke out of him was that he started to see poetry as almost like a math problem. And so as he read the poem, he started seeing how you could put it together. And that I think explains a lot of the precise structure and just the tightness of what he writes. So I'd like to introduce Wing-Tek. He is a Honolulu businessman and poet. Bamboo Ridge Press published his 2 collections of poetry, Expounding the Doubtful Points and the Nanjing Massacre Poems. So let's give a welcome to Wing-Tek. Thank you for being here.
First, thank you very much for Windward Community College and also to Susan St. John for inviting us. I also have to offer an apology to those who attended the HPU reading last month or saw it on YouTube, because I'm going to be reading the same 4 poems. But hopefully, I'll do a better job this time. December 12th, 1899, a man in Honolulu, Chinatown died from the bubonic plague. At the time, medical science had not figured out how the Black Death was contracted, though it was suggested it had something to do with the squalid conditions in the area. So the government immediately imposed a quarantine. The streets bounding Chinatown were patrolled by armed guards and no one was allowed in or out. My first poem tries to describe the confusion and panic that this caused, with all manner of viewpoints being circulated, maybe something similar to the variety of responses to COVID, which we can find on the internet today. Before I read this piece, I need to mention that the Board of Health at that time quickly took the drastic measure of mandating the burning down of any building where someone had died from the plague. Also, for an oral reading, I will try to change my tone of voice for each of the different speakers, reflecting their varying opinions. This is called Rumors. We had supplied guns and ammunition for the uprising, but the Hapa and his rebels were defeated. It was a secret not well kept. The government blamed us too, so now we are in quarantine as punishment. Look, the pestilence has been ravaging their homeland. Why should we let more of them in? And as for those who are already here, we need to cordon them off to safeguard the rest of our islands. As kids, we grew up in a one-room house with a dirt floor, running around barefoot all day. But that is how people in our village got sick from poisonous vapors in the soil. Here, we wear boots, prophylactics against the plague. I am one of you, but studied Western medicine. Under the microscope, I can see the crescent-shaped germs. Our Chinatown must be cleaned out, our basements, the slop cans, the refuge in our alleyways. Otherwise, all of us will be infected. Our nephew was delirious with a bulbul in his groin, so we spirited him away to a remote attic. Later at night, we left his corpse in front of a hospital so that no one would know where he had died. If not, our house would have been put to the torch. Their race is predisposed to this illness. They do not care about living in such filthy quarters. They eat all manner of strange meats and vegetables. They even delight in dogs and rats. No wonder they are susceptible. Authorities have roped off our few streets because of the contaminations within. But there is this Howley girl outside these boundaries who also succumbed to this disease. Will they burn their house down? Will her house be burnt down as well? Our committee worked so hard on annexation, but all of our years will be for naught. If this Black Death does not get under control, the US will not grant us territorial status. Destruction is the only certain disinfection. All of us will die, but let us live with dignity. Instead of the ignominy of being kept in a cage, we must preserve our own customs and traditions. This way of life is more essential than the so-called sciences they espouse. The line at the end of that poem, "Destruction is the only certain disinfection," is a direct quote from an editorial published in the Pacific Commercial Advertiser on January 1st, 1900. The next poem was written from my perspective of being in lockdown for COVID, imagining what it might be like 121 years ago to be stuck inside 16 blocks with 7,000 other inhabitants, sitting ducks waiting for the plague to one by one infect them. The image of living in a rat cage was inspired by an article, How to Catch Rats, by one of the doctors who was dealing with the plague in San Francisco around the same time. This second poem is called Caught in a Cage. Like rats, we are caught in a cage, tempted by raw meat or dried shrimp, mixed in beneath wood shavings, placed in the far end, and surrounded outside by trails of fat kernels of sticky rice. The cage has been smoked to remove any lingering trace of human hands. Other cages are also set nearby so that once one is caught, especially if it is a female, its cries, its pungency will attract others. Soon we are a cluster of the doomed, ensnared inside our cramped wire boxes, each with no way forward, no way to escape. Alone and together, we sleep, we pace, we relive what ifs, we bargain and promise the future. We blame others, we pity ourselves, we make do trying to keep up with our daily tasks. We wait. January 20th, 1900. The firemen had set up a controlled burn in the area just diamond head of where the Chinatown Cultural Plaza is now located. Unfortunately, the winds shifted, causing the fire to get out of control. It resulted in the utter destruction of 16 blocks or 38 acres from Kukui Street to the harbor, from Nu'uanu Stream to Nu'uanu Avenue. This next poem, published in the current issue of Bamboo Ridge, tries to capture this momentous event. It's called The Fire. The health board condemns the shanties as someone inside has died from the plague. Other inhabitants are summarily evicted, gathering whatever they can, but with nowhere to go. The fire department surrounds the perimeter, poised with their hoses for the start of the burn. A crowd converges, curious, angry, and resigned, and worried that they themselves will be next. The fire is ignited as rehearsed, but unexpected gusts come down from the valley. Firemen vainly try to contain its spread. People are stunned, immobile, uncertain about what to do. Before long, embers billow up, wafted by the wind, and quickly jump from rooftop to rooftop. Residents rush to stamp out spot fires, tearing down even their own houses to form fire breaks. Narrow alleyways turn into gauntlets of flame. A fireball scours the street, combusting all in its path. Faces are blistered, hair singed, eyes wide from fear. Everyone is shouting, drowning out the chaos. A store selling fireworks for the new year explodes. A lumberyard blazes on and on and on. A few run home to retrieve gold or papers. Most, though, just flee with the clothes on their backs. Inexorably, the inferno marches toward the wharves. It melts electric coils and a hastily abandoned fire engine. Volunteers carry on their backs women with bound feet. Opium addicts, delirious, are rescued from their den. Sparks fly into the steeple of the church. Soon it becomes a furnace, consuming its beams. Unsupported, its bells crash into the sanctuary below. All of Chinatown hears this dirge. The refugees try to escape the conflagration, wanting to cross the bridge over the stream, but quarantine militia, pick handles ready, block their way, leaving them to huddle in a no man's land to wait. The church referred to in the poem is the famous Kamakapili Church at its original location. No one was reported killed in the fire, but all of the residents were rounded up and placed in detention camps, as the authorities were worried that some might still be contagious. The rest of Honolulu leaped into action to provide food and clothing and money, maybe something similar to the food banks, for instance, that were organized this past year. The survivors were grateful, though one person, Wong Chow, published a letter in the Pacific Commercial Advertiser on January 25th, 1900, offering another point of view. This last poem was inspired by him. It's entitled, In the Detention Camp. Burn down our prison and now put us in jail. You say we are still filled with bugs, even though we just escaped the inferno with nothing but our shock and fear. Even these clothes we are wearing, our only remaining possessions, must be stripped off so we can stand stark naked like plucked chickens ready for your antiseptic baths. It is a humiliation only surpassed by our having to suffer your preening civic pride, strutting like stallions on parade. This listing of all of your gifts, parts of your white demon clothing, the rice and poi and potatoes, baskets full of vegetables and meats, all the sewing bees organized, and the names and dollar amounts of cash reported in your newspapers. Would that this plenty replace what we have lost. You shot an arrow into us and then came over to dress our wound, all the while condescending to expect our offer of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wing-Tek. Whenever my students talk about how they don't like poetry because it's too flowery and hard to understand, I tell them about Wing-Tek, because Wing-Tek's poetry is like a knife, like it just slices you. It's like right there, and it's very easy to understand. So thank you for being here. I wanted to stop and just acknowledge the presence of one of the other editors here, Miss T, and she doesn't need to get off mic if she doesn't want to, but she is the fairy godmother and the nose to the grindstone both. So thank you, Miss T, for being here with us. Hey, and her favorite childhood book, Charlotte's Web. Yeah, right? All of those traumas. Anyway, thanks, Miss T. Okay, our next reader, I am so pleased to announce Travis Thompson. I first met Travis when he was doing a reading way back at, remember Borders, a long time ago on the second floor. And I was like, who is this person? And like, what's he about? And we eventually got to become friends. And then we became co-hosts of like 2 different poetry events, Reverses and Rhythm and Rhyme. And
Where's
then
the word Raptors?
Words at Words Rafters 3, man, long time. I watched him rise into stardom and then become a mentor to like young poets and then go national and take it into the schools. And so I'm just so happy to have him here. And let me tell you a little bit more about him. He is an award-winning Kanaka Korean spoken word poet and touring teacher artist from Kalihi, Honolulu, Oahu, Hawaii. As the only child of activist educators, he began performing his poetry at protest rallies and political demonstrations in the year 2000. A fixture in the Honolulu spoken poetry community since 2003, he was a co-founder of the Reverses Poetry Collective, co-founder and director for the celebrated local youth literacy nonprofit known as Youth Speaks Hawaii, Pacific Tongues, and is currently a founding member of the Chinatown Spoken Arts Collective known as the Hawaii Poets Society. So thank you, Travis, for being here.
Thank you guys for having me.
One more thing, I'm sorry, can I add that his favorite childhood book, Indian in the Cupboard, but his very first recommendation, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, literary, dig it. Okay, thanks, Travis.
Thank you, Brenda. And I just wanted to thank all of you readers and authors and artists for joining us today. Thank you, Vanessa, for bringing Fukui into this space with us. And thank you, Wing-Tek, for your very unique style and brand of poetry, very guttural, maybe, I guess we'll say. Because I remember when we used to host a poetry event at the Arts and Marks Garage, Brenda and I and DJ Mr. Nick, we had Wing-Tek as one of our featured artists at that event. And I just remember his last poem being about working for DLNR on top of Kaululā and having to shoot a goat. And he had like shot it from afar. And then the last part of the poem was coming up close to finish the goat. And then sort of the scene of that is like how he left the stage just like after that. I was like, wow. And I never forgot that poem. I mean, no, not word for word, but I mean, I've never seen anyone do a poem like that on our stage. Not ever since, or not even before. So, okay, so I have 3 poems in this book. 2 of them I co-wrote with other poets, And one of them cannot be with me today because I'm at work and he's at work as well. But I wasn't able to read it last time because, well, I had a different poet with me. So we read a different poem. So I wanted to bring him into the space with me today. If I could just find the poem. His name is Jesse Lippman. And Jesse is known as, we call him the godfather of spoken word poetry in Hawaii, because he has been a fixture and was one of the first people to ever sort of give us these opportunities and organize these events. If I can find the poem. All right. Well, I'll find the Jesse Lippman poem. For now, I have the other poem. I wrote this with Kamele Donaldson. So it's a team piece. Imagine, if you would, like 2 voices. And this was written in March or April of 2020. So there are stats that I put in the book that are since obsolete. It goes, the name of it is Go Home, Stay Home. It goes, what, brah? No can hear. What, brah? No, like, listen. I don't care if round trip tickets to Honolulu were only $115. Nearly 3 million people are sick. I don't care if the Airbnb in Lanning C was only $20 a night, over 200,000 people are dead. I don't care if you think this global pandemic is just a hoax by China and the Dems. From Honolulu to New York City, 200 million people are living under a government-imposed stay-at-home order. So, brah, go home and stay home. Hey, tourists, stay home. Hey, college spring breakers, go home. Hey, all non-essential workers, stay home. After all, uninvited outsiders invading Hawaii has always been non-essential. Ever since Kanaka Club's Captain Cook of Kealakekua Bay, outsiders invading Hawaii has always been about colonization, has always been about capitalist interest, has always been about stealing the land, kicking out Kanaka, turning our aina into a parking lot and a playground for those willing to pay the price of paradise. Hawaii is not your pandemic playground hideaway. Maybe you didn't hear when Governor Ige encouraged tourists not to travel to Hawaii at this time. Maybe you didn't hear when Mayor Caldwell encouraged all new arrivals to self-quarantine for 14 days. So we are here to make sure that you hear us loud and clear as we encourage you to go home, brah. Stay home, brah. Excuse me if I seem upset at the image of outsiders landing at Honolulu airport during a global pandemic. Excuse me if I seem heated at the broadcast of Trump telling lies about Lysol and UV floodlight enemas. Excuse me if I become triggered by CNN at the sight of dead people in body bags stacked too deep on ice rinks. As a Kanaka, let me tell you that when outsiders invade Hawaii, it is we that have died in the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands, and we are not alone. For many Pacific Islanders throughout Oceania, the diseases of travel are all too familiar to us. 1778, syphilis. 1804, cholera. 1820s, influenza. 1839, mumps. 1848, measles. 1853, smallpox. 1869, leprosy. 2020, COVID-19. In less than 100 years of the arrival of the West, nearly 90% of the native Hawaiian population was Makedai dead. We chanted Kanikau, we danced Tula for the deceased. We watched as our Ohana cliff jumped from Haena Point, leaving footprints on the clouds at sunset, disappearing into the horizon with the green flash, joining our Kokuna, but no longer shall we reserve our voices for only grieving the dead. No longer shall we be silenced in the face of another deadly pandemic, and no longer shall we listen to make nice and show aloha. So tourists, stay home. Hey, college spring breakers, stay home. Hey, all invited outsiders and non-essential workers, stay home. And all you racist, capitalist, imperialist, globalizers, and invaders throughout Pacifica, go home because you and your kind are not wanted here. So we strongly encourage you to take your sicknesses back home with you and stay there. Thank you.
Travis, can you do a 30-second version of that for a PSA? Thank you.
I think that moment is past though, right? I mean, like at least most of us are like all vaxxed up by now, right?
Yeah.
I just got my booster.
We'll see. Hey, right on.
Okay, so lately I've been working with different Hawaiian forms and Hawaiian genres of poetry, right? And oli and creative writing and mo'olelo and vahipana. And so I've ever since my dad died in 2015, I've been writing tons of kanikau. I've also lost a lot of people in the last couple of years. And I don't know, that's the space I'm in. So I wrote this poem back then. This is 2017. And began as a writing workshop and exercise imagery workshop. But I loved it so much, I just kept it. It goes like this. It goes, alone on the beach at night, with a shovel and a bottle of whiskey, I dug through the shallow sand until I broke through to the salt water below and took that as proof of life. Proof that I can still feel something. Proof that my heart still feels like the hills when the thunderstorm rolls in and the pain rumbles into an ache and packing its bags and settling into the shelter of my bones. See, eventually, the rising pain crashed like a giant rogue wave upon the levees of my ribcage, and I screamed your name into the night, letting loose the house fire trapped in my throat and chasing grief halfway down my spine. See, alone on the sea at night, I chummed the waters around my lifeboat and beckoned sea monsters with eyes colder than their blood. They came to sing me siren songs that leave weary sailors lost at sea. I grabbed tight onto their tail fins and let them drag me under to try and find you, but I did not find you because I did not drown. Instead, I learned to walk on water. And though I've never found my sea legs, I stutter step my way into singing love songs, the kind only the ocean can hear. Sad songs that recall the rising tide in your lungs, how you were the sinking ship no one could save. And the ocean remembers, tells me that you had a voice the size of a barrier reef and a laugh as big as Maui. Alone on Olomana at night, I watched how the Aina carries the bodies of the broken on its shoulders. It reminded me that keeping my hurt in a cage, confined to the darkest corner of my mind, isn't called surviving, just because the weight of its burden bends my back like a rainbow to nowhere. On Olomana, the trees whispered, Kaululā. There is a coral forest growing in your spine, and even if you're too small to reach the top, you should never stop climbing. So every night, I went chasing the ghost of my father through hurricane-beaten coastlines of self, and my eyes never relented from storm watch. Alone at night, with a blank page and a pen, I found you between the lines. So I made long-distance phone calls to the hole in my chest, where the last wheeze of a dying star echoed through the universe, masked by the sound of songs written in the coldness of once warm memories. Thank you. And I really want to bring Jesse Lippman into this space.
That'd be great.
You know, metaphorically, because he's at work in the kitchen right now at KKV. And I'm actually at work right now at an all-girls school in Kaneohe. So if you see any kids enter the room, you know why. They're not mine. Okay, here we go. So this would be one of the first times I've ever read this poem without Jesse. So it goes like this. It goes, it's called The Ice is Melting. When I wrote this poem, it was in Toledo, Ohio, and I had never driven before on black ice. And then I did. And then I wrote this poem. It goes, it's called The Ice is Melting. It goes, somewhere outside, city streets are blanketed in sheets of black ice melting drip by drip. The atmosphere is changing. Somewhere outside, the snow is melting for the last time, streaming into currents, lost in storm drains, gutters of sickness spilling back to a dead sea, resurrected in fractions of inches, inviting themselves inland, disappearing beaches, birthing a great Pacific garbage patch twice the size of Texas. The fish are drowning in our undying plastic. Drips become ripples. Somewhere outside, climate refugees are running from the tide, chasing them to higher ground while we ignore dripping faucets, wash our hands with blind faith in the market, flip carbon levels like condos, morals never mixed properly with money. The God we worship on the currency is a mirage of progress, answering us like the prayers of an atheist. So let thick breeze carry us like dry salt to vultures, scavenging on the carcass of empire. Parasitic profiteers and bottom line puppeteers prostitute our politics, so we are debtors to a system anchored like an oil rig to the ocean's basin. Meanwhile, real global terrorists decapitate rainforests. Real global terrorists dam rivers for ransom, hold resources for hostage. Real global terrorists frack the seafloor in search of oil, pave cities over floodplains, because real global terrorists murder entire ecosystems. So catch your breath beneath the underbelly of our overconsumption. Cry me a merger when the rent's overdue. Sing me a bedtime lullaby in a refugee tent. Alexa, wail me a blues song for gentrified graveyards rising from the dead like landfills the size of mountains. See, in the space between the Green New Deal and corporate interests, we've become non-recyclable waste. We are polar bears clinging to Arctic glaciers the size of ice cubes, sinking into extinction on Super Bowl Sunday because somewhere outside, the ice is melting, dripping tears through generations of our children's unborn children. We are aborting gardens of sustenance, modifying the genes of our seeds to feed coarse throats. And we can't nurse Mother Earth back to health if our credit can't afford her medical. Father Time has foreseen every disaster brewing and is turning his face backwards because all the cash money in the world will never be enough to hold back the tide of our endgame. Hell will overheat before it freezes over, and soon none of us will have anything to do with folded paper, but fan ourselves and pray for mercy from a world on fire, bloated from swallowing the sun. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you, Jesse Lippman, by way of Travis. Okay. Our next reader is Sue Haglund, and I'm so pleased that she was able to be here today. There's a lot going on. And let me tell you a little bit about Sue, the Dule poet and scholar native of Panama. She currently lives in Eva Beach. She received her doctorate from the Department of Political Science at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and she has published in Intentions Journal, the first anthology of Dule poetry, Antologia de Poetas Cunas, Panama 2015, Latino Studies, and North Dakota Quarterly. So we're pleased to have her here. Sue, can you tell us what your favorite childhood book was / is? Oh.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad to have made it. My name is Sue, and my favorite childhood literature would be from the 4th grade when we moved to California from Panama. So it was my first time entering an American school, and English and Spanish were 2 languages I learned at the same time, but I was not a master in English. Haven't mastered English yet, but the first time in 4th grade in Oceanside, California, our 4th grade teachers, I had 2 teachers, they had us read a novel called Where the Red Fern Grows. And to me, that was the first American novel to read, and one of my favorites because it showed hardships, compassion, transitioning. And as a 4th grader transitioning to a new environment and having your world turn upside down, it made a huge impact, and it's one of my favorite literatures that I carry with me to today. A little bit for these poems, it's also about that too, about that transition of changes and what we went through and continue to go through with the pandemic, COVID, and quarantine. Quarantine in 3 parts is based on 3 poems, reflecting each month, March, April, and May. And I'm gonna read part 1, March Quarantine. When I close my eyes. When I close my eyes, I hope to feel the wind's warm embrace, silently whispering, we are here. When I close my eyes, I hope to smell the salty, sweet ocean air of waves kissing shoreline saying, we are here. When I close my eyes, I hope to hear beautiful bird songs melodically chanting to the morning dew, we are here. When I close my eyes, I hope to taste sky waters, bluest blue drops, falling in love, falling in light, gliding words, we are here. When I close my eyes, I hope to touch the flowering rosy plants made of soft petals and prickly thorns, soundless throbbing veins exhaling, we are here. When I close my eyes, I hope to see setting sun, leaving space defining time for brother moon to rise, and opaqueness illuminating paths, singing, we are here. When I close my eyes, I hope to sense all of my lovely senses of interstitial ways, navigating through my eternal being, remembering we are here. Part 2 with April and May, and part 1, they come together. Part 1 was because I also lost my dad and my best friend back to back in January. Then the funeral, and then pandemic. And so when they closed everything down and not allowing ourselves to breathe, part 1 was when I closed my eyes, waiting for everything to open up. Part 2 is a reflecting of, in hopes that when things would open up, what would my world look like when I opened my eyes? And here's part 2, when I opened my eyes. When I open my eyes, I hope to see the words on a page flow off my soul into my own warm embrace. When I open my eyes, I hope to feel the smile on my face as it falls only to rise from sadness to joy, from darkness to light, from one end to another in the small space of mine. When I open my eyes, I hope to hear your guttural laughter breaking down the silence around and depth to show that life is one thing we hold. When I open my eyes, I hope to smell the ethereal fragrances of ginger flowers permeating, blooming along the mountain edge. When I open my eyes, I hope to taste my favorite tea in company of friends in an open space beyond this current confining walls we call home. When I open my eyes, I hope to touch the salty waters, washing ashore every grain of sand, only to remind me a deeper horizon beyond here, beyond now. When I open my eyes, I hope to sense the beating of my heart with its rhythmic patterns as I gaze up in the skies, lying down in comforting sands. When I open my eyes, I hope to know this all soon will arrive. But for now, when I open my eyes, all of these appear in my dreams. Part 3 was made for a friend who we were talking, and one day, days like today, when things happen at last minute and you can't control it and you're just trying to make it like I tried to make it today. One phrase I said, fuck it, not today. My friend was like, I love that line. And so since their birthday was in May, I wrote this poem inspired by that line, fuck it, not today. So it's called When You Close Your Eyes. When you close your eyes, I hope you see light as bright and shiny gold as La Cempasúchil. When you close your eyes, I hope you hear los cantos e instrumentos raging through the winds as the Café Tacuba rebel you are. When you close your eyes, I hope you feel brightly colored threads of purepecha, blusa, rebosa, falda, delantal, woven stories, sequin fabrics of pascuaro. When you close your eyes, I hope you smell fragrant warmth of spring durante los momentos de tranquilidad, to balance your thoughts, to plant your roots in all spaces you dance. When you close your eyes, as the sun sets and the moon rises, may you remember all your circles, all of your brilliance, as the educated chingona you are, being still and unmoved, bravely repeating, fuck it, not today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much. When I listen to your writing, and actually, all the poets, it just reminds me that poetry, poets in particular, feel things so deeply, and those things cannot be communicated in conversation. You can't really text somebody about it, and you can't sort of just say, hey, I had this thought. So poetry is its own language that just creates the feeling in words. And it's like incantation. So I'm just really drawn by all of that, which is a wonderful way to now introduce our final poet, Lanning Lee and Yobo Brada. Yeah, how's the kimchi coming? All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Lanning. Lanning was born in Honolulu, earned his BA and PhD at the University of Manoa, and his MA at the University of Wisconsin. One of the first 6 PhD candidates in English, I didn't know that, at UHM in 1987, he authored the first dissertation in creative writing. He's published 2 books of poetry. and his memoir, From Point A to C to Y to B, A Sentimental Journey Through Hawaii and Wisconsin, came out recently. A collection of Hawaii sonnets, a collection of Hawaii short stories, and his second memoir will be published shortly. His first in a series of 9 Honolulu crime adventures will appear soon in serial form. All are or will be on Amazon. Follow his daily writing blog, LanningLee.com. And before he begins, Lanning, could you tell us what was your favorite childhood book?
You know, since you started asking, I thought, oh my God, do I have one? You know, I remember lots of them, but I wished after I read the Harry Potter series for the 37th time that had been one of my childhood book series. So many, I mean, I loved Winnie the Pooh, you know, all the Winnie the Pooh adventures stick with me. Beatrix Potter, you know, stuff my mom read to us, and I love the illustrations. But yeah, I mean, I just love Harry Potter. Anyway, okay. Should I just start going, Brenda?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Now that I'm sorry, this is only my first reading, so I'm probably not going to be as polished as Wing-Tek. I want to thank you know, Daryl Lum and Eric Cha for starting Bamboo Ridge back in 1978. 78, right? Wing-Tek. Yeah. And keeping it going and handing it off, their baby off to all of these wonderful new generation people, you know, Brenda and all the editors, Jean Toyama, and Joy. If you're watching this, Joy Citron Kobayashi, she's like an unsung hero of Bamboo Ridge, and you hardly ever get to hear about her or see her, but she's sort of like kind of an energetic heart of Bamboo Ridge. Anyway, you know, centers, talking about, you know, foundational things and centers. By the way, Vanessa, I love that reference to Hilo Hanakaiki. I love that song. I love the Big Island. I love that every time I hear it. I love that journey, you know, Puna, Ka'u, Kona, Kavaihai, Kohala Waimea, Hamakua, and, you know, then the Haina, right? It always brings me back to the Big Island. I used to own property on the Big Island. I thought I'd retire on the Big Island up at Volcano. I eventually had to sell my property because I'm retired here in Honolulu. But Volcano is an energetic center for me. After I retired, I traveled, up until the pandemic, I was traveling all over the place. Scotland was beautiful, maybe the most beautiful, but Volcano is still a place that gives me the most energy when I visit it. It's the most beautiful site to me. Looking down that Hole Pali to the ocean, that's one of the most breathtaking sights in the world. When you bust out of Chain of Crater Road and you see that 4,000 foot drop to the beautiful blue ocean. I'm half Korean, so I went to Korea finally, and you know, that's really, in a way, kind of one of my one of the supports, my foundational supports, and it was really important to me to get there on my travels, and so I'm glad I did. And so this poem on page 81, for those of you who have it, my dad had a fishing business. He was an insurance and real estate salesman, but he also had a fishing business for many years, long line fishing. And it was a tough business. I think in the end, if it wasn't a wash, it was a loss for him overall. Anyway, this is called The Price of Fish. In his previous life, my father ran a long line fishing business here in Honolulu. His crew, all Korean nationals, he'd sponsored to come over along with their families. My father, a mega foster father with mega foster family debt, helping these men, their wives and children, co-signing mortgages, car loans, credit card applications, helping with grocery bills, doctor bills, electricity, water, and phone bills, rarely reimbursed, shouldering the financial burden of so many. I'm a tourist here on the fish auction floor in Busan, listening to the screams in Korean over the price of fish. Some bids for a special individual one, others for batches, all fresh off the boat. In my previous life, I would go with my father to the pre-dawn fish auctions in Honolulu, listen to the chorus of cries, the coda, a catch rarely paying what my father and the crew had hoped for, but most times enough to cover costs. Here now, in my current life, listening to these Koreans fight about the value of fish in an angry language I don't know, I do understand their curse to settle for the ironic, highest, lowest price. And I hear my father's cries. And here now, in the middle of Korea, I feel like I'm back home again. Every place I would turn, I would see my grandfather. I couldn't believe it. Everybody looked like my grandfather. It was incredible. Anyway, I wanted to read one more poem that I wrote. I actually have the date right here from my lanninglee.com page. Travis, is that a Milwaukee, what do you call a brewer's hat? Travis, is that a brewer's hat? Are you a Brewers fan?
No, actually, what I've been doing is I've been appropriating all these different sports hats, and I like to use M for like Mo'olelo, or
it looks a heck of a lot like a Milwaukee Brewers hat. And
no, it definitely is. It definitely is a Milwaukee Brewers hat for sure.
My dad was a Milwaukee Braves fan and turned me on to baseball that way. And he couldn't support them anymore when they moved to Atlanta. He didn't care for that. But I became, when I went to Wisconsin, a big Brewers fan. The first Brewers game I went to was against Toronto, and Toronto's first year in the league. And the manager and three of the major players were all Hawaii Islanders. So, I mean, it was a blast. I'd come, 1 year later, I'm watching the same Hawaii Islanders play against the Brewers. It was terrific. The fans, I think the Brewer fans were kind of annoyed because when the Toronto guys would come up that I knew and loved from back here in Hawaii, I'd be cheering for them. And, they'd turn around and look at me like, what the heck? Anyway, I wrote this poem back on April 1st. Before the pandemic started, I was going back to Wisconsin, to Madison every year, spring break time. And I would write for 5 days straight. It was just an exercise that I took on. And the writing there, like the writing when I write up at Volcano, was just poured out of me. And Madison, if I had to pick one place in the world that was the most important center of my life, believe it or not, it would be a place in Madison. This poem is called, can you see this? Ku'auhau, genealogy, okay? And it's dedicated to my folks and to the University of Wisconsin. Once upon a time, there was a little girl from Chicago, city of the big shoulders. And there was a little boy from Keikaha, Kauai, tiny town of big cane fields. And the little girl grew up to attend the University of Wisconsin in Madison, city of Oscar Mayer and Renabaum drugstores, to where the little boy from Hawaii also made his way before World War II, left to serve, then returned, and they met in Der Ratskeller, renowned dining hall on the Badger campus, where I was essentially conceived, although not actually until 1954, on the island of Oahu, land of Diamond Head, Leahi as it is called here, and of Waikiki Beach, a name famous around the world. Was then born in Kapi'olani Hospital, where Barack Obama would be born 7 years later. Grew up in Honolulu, city of state government. Attended the University of Hawaii for my undergraduate education. Went off to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin, where I sat down to have a beer in Der Ratskeller. Toasted the chance meeting between that girl and that boy who lived out their lives happily for the most part, ever after. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanning. Well, so we're running pretty close up to 12 o'clock. And if you would like to stick around just maybe for a few minutes, anyone who can, if there's questions, please do. Before that, I just want to thank Susan again for hosting us and having us here. It's such a delightful afternoon. And thank you to all our readers, Vanessa, Travis, Wing-Tek, Sue, and Lanning. And then also on behalf of the other editors, Misty and Don Carrera Cheng and Meredith Deshay Enos. You know, we're so proud to have all these writers here for you. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And if there's any questions, if you'd like to put them in the chat for our readers, and our readers, if you can stick around, awesome. If not, we understand. Are there any questions for our readers? Thank you. We love organizing these readings. They've been really, I mean, genuinely fun. So nice to be here. Okay, questions going in 5, going in 4, going in 3. Ooh, let me just point your attention to the chat. You can buy a copy of Kipuka through the Bamboo Ridge online bookstore. The link is included by Misty. Thank you. You know, Christmas is right around the corner. So, you know, stock up. All right, any questions, any comments for our wonderful readers? Oh, thank you from Minnesota. Thank you for being here. The powers of Zoom. Okay. So I think we're gonna wrap it up for today.
Wait, sorry, there is a question. Sorry.
Oh, there is. I missed it. What was it? Misty, go ahead.
Shauna has asked, how has the pandemic changed your writing practices? Open to anyone.
Oh,
How has the pandemic changed your writing practices?
I've written a few more angry poems about the pandemic. I know that for sure, and stories. And I can't, one of them was humorous, but I mean, that was hard. Yeah, I'm generally not angry in my writing, but I've been pretty angry in my pandemic writing.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I started writing the poems about the Honolulu Chinatown plague and fire after going into lockdown last March. So there's maybe 6, 7 poems and a short story that are all related to this one event that occurred 121 years ago, which was a previous lockdown because of a health emergency. And so I did some research and I started writing these poems. So that's one way of trying to deal with the present situation.
For me, I've been hosting poetry events for a very long time, just about like one a month for like maybe the last 15 years or something, like on and off. And to bring that to a sudden halt was actually incredibly like gratifying. And it was like being on vacation, and I didn't realize like how much stress I just embodied and kept inside me for like promoting events, hosting events, finding features, you know, all the things. And then, you know, going to the event, setting up the sound system and making sure you get out of there in time because they have an event after you and all of that stuff. But what it did do was like, I stopped writing poetry because I felt like I had a lot less events to go to. And I felt like I had a lot less to say. And I felt like I think I wrote a poem about Tiger King, and maybe that was kind of it for a while. And then, yeah. And then I will say that like I used the time to finish my dissertation and, you know, finish grad school. And, you know, I kind of had no more excuses, you know? So thank you guys, thanks. I defend on the 10th, so we'll see about that.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Congratulations on finishing your dissertation. For me, my writings changed in a way that more for the positive, because it gave me more time to focus on the style of writing that I wanted to do. I've been writing for a long time. I just think that what happened was the pandemic had opened up other avenues. I'm Kuna Indian from Panama. So I come from, our nation are known as poets govern Cunayala, as one of the Nicaraguan poets, Ernesto Cardenal, had once said, and on his visit to Panama. So poetry and writing in its essence has always been, because my family are storytellers as well. But for me, when the pandemic happened, a lot of the Kuna organizations in Panama were hosting virtual Zoom online events of poetry readings, rap and music all over the world. So it would be a handful of poets like myself, and then rappers and musicians, and we'll just have monthly events called Voces de Abayala, Voices of the Americas. And for me, my writing has amplified in a positive way. Now it's also made me focus on what kind of themes to do and what kind of messages. And opposite to Lanning, I've always wrote angry. So I've always wrote angry. So I save it for the politics when I write politics. But if anything, it's shown me how to write compassionately. And that's how these poems that I read today came out of dig deeper on the compassion side and less on the anger side that I'm used to. Thanks.
Look how cute, raising hand.
I,
Raising hand, okay.
yes. Is Misty still here?
Yeah, she's still here.
Yep, I'm still here.
Misty, on the old site, we had that thread where people could jump on and write thoughts about the pandemic. I haven't actually, I just thought about it again. I haven't, is it on the new site? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, it was actually not on the site. It was something that we did on a separate, like, sort of workspace. I can try to find the link to that. But
well, it just leaped to mind, because then all you guys, everybody, all you guys watching or whoever can just jump on and write anything you want about the pandemic. It's a wonderful flow of emotions and ideas that happened over a period of time nearer the beginning of the pandemic. And I wanted to say one more thing, Brenda. Sorry, I don't mean to. Folks, there's only us. Well, that's okay. Every month for the past 12 years, there's a monthly writing contest on the Bamboo Ridge site. It's the Bamboo Shoots Writing Contest. And they have themes there which you can totally ignore and write whatever you want. But there are suggested themes every month, and it's fun. They give awards and stuff like that. I'm not sure who the judges are, but they seem to be pretty kind in their awards. So anyway, you could try checking that out. Every month, you can enter as many times as you want. We had one person in October write like 300 Halloween haiku. It was quite a stream of Halloween stuff. Quite a brilliant outpouring. Anyway, I should have said that when there was more people online, but thanks, Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanning, for plugging that. Let's see, Vanessa, did you have any thoughts about how the pandemic has affected your writing?
It's made me want to explore what Bamboo Ridge has kindly suggested in a competition, speculative fiction, where science, the environment, just wondering and bringing different dimensions of time into my work. And it's experimental, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying living in that space for now, and really love the way everybody wove pieces of their soul into their work. I just wanted to say that I see it in all of you, and it's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to spend a Thursday. So thank you again for being here. And once again, mahalo to Susan and WCC, to all our readers, to the co-editors. Have a wonderful afternoon. And you know what? As long as we do our best and we're surviving, that's plenty. So let's just keep forging on. All right. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Please enjoy the volume and have a great afternoon. Aloha. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the readers. Yeah, they were so great.
Thank you, Susan. We'll see you again.
Bye-bye.